You're watching a Highwire Media podcast.
The trial of Ted Kaczynski was a watershed moment in American criminal history. For nearly 2 decades, the Unabomber had remained an elusive figure, his terror spanning across multiple states and leaving behind a trail of devastating bombings. Kaczynski's trial, however, marked the moment the public would finally confront the mind behind the attacks. No longer just a faceless figure hiding in the shadows. Kaczynski would be in the spotlight, forced to face justice for his violent campaign. The media frenzy surrounding the trial was unprecedented. For years, the Unabomber's identity was a mystery, and as soon as it was revealed that Kaczynski was the man responsible for the bombings, the news captivated the nation. Every detail about his past, his beliefs, and his motivations was dissected and broadcasted. The media's portrayal of Kaczynski as a reclusive genius with radical views only added to the mystique, with the public eager to understand how and why this man, once a Harvard graduate and a brilliant mathematician, had turned to violence. This trial didn't just capture the public's attention because of the dramatic nature of the crimes. It symbolized the end of one of the longest and most complex investigations in U.S. history. The Unabomber Task Force, a massive collaborative effort that included the FBI, local law enforcement, and experts, had worked relentlessly to track down the person behind the bombings. The team faced countless dead ends, an evolving suspect profile, and the challenges of piecing together evidence from the scattered locations of the bombings. Their persistence eventually led to Kaczynski's capture in 1996, and by 1998 the trial would begin, bringing the long-sought conclusion to a case that had haunted the nation for years. As the trial progressed, it became clear that Kaczynski's story was more than just a tale of a lone terrorist. It was a chilling reflection of the dark side of radical ideology, mental health, and a society grappling with the threat of domestic terrorism. The trial wasn't just about securing a conviction, it was a public reckoning, with the nation's collective fear and curiosity reaching a peak. We're going to take a quick break from this episode, and I'd like to discuss my sponsor, NordVPN, the service that keeps me confident and secure every time I go online. If you're not familiar, a VPN stands for Virtual Private Network, and NordVPN is one of the best out there for keeping your browsing activity under wraps. Why do I use NordVPN? First, it gives me total online privacy. When you connect to NordVPN servers, all your internet data is encrypted. That means snoopers, advertisers, and even your internet provider can't see your personal info or track your digital footprints. It's like having an invisible cloak for your online life. Second, NordVPN is awesome for unblocking geo-restricted content. Love streaming sports from overseas or catching up on that show that isn't available in your country yet? Just open NordVPN, pick a server from one of their thousands of locations worldwide, and boom! You'll have access to content you couldn't see before. Plus, with speeds faster than ever, you can stream in high definition without those pesky buffering interruptions. Now let's talk simplicity. NordVPN's app is super user-friendly. Whether you're on a phone, laptop, or tablet, you can connect with just one click. And if you ever get stuck, their customer support is there 24/7. Another big highlight, NordVPN has a no-logs policy, which means that they never track or store your data. Your digital world stays yours alone. Lastly, if you travel often like me, NordVPN really comes in handy. Whether you're on public Wi-Fi at airports, hotels, or coffee shops, your data is always at risk. But with NordVPN, you can safeguard your connection and keep hackers at bay. No more worrying about whether your coffee shop Wi-Fi is safe. So if you're serious about protecting your privacy, accessing global content, and just having peace of mind online, NordVPN is the way to go. Give it a try, and I promise you'll wonder why you waited so long. Hit the link in the description to learn more and grab a special deal. Stay safe out there, happy browsing with NordVPN. Now let's get back to the rest of our episode. When Ted Kaczynski first appeared in court, his demeanor immediately set him apart from the typical image of a defendant in a criminal trial. Physically, he was a disheveled figure, often appearing in a plain, unkempt outfit, with his wild beard and uncut hair adding to his striking appearance. His calm and composed manner seemed almost at odds with the brutal acts he was accused of, making his presence in the courtroom all the more unsettling. In a room filled with tension, Kaczynski sat quietly, rarely showing emotion and giving little away in terms of his inner thoughts. From the start, Kaczynski's refusal to acknowledge the authority of the court became evident. He rejected standard legal procedures, choosing to challenge the system that was trying to bring him justice. His most notable act of defiance was his rejection of his attorney's pleas to use the insanity defense. Instead, he wanted to represent himself, arguing that he should have the ability to defend his own beliefs and control the narrative. This decision, while reflecting his desire for autonomy, also made clear his intent to maintain control over his story, and to present himself as a man of conviction, someone fighting for a cause rather than a mentally unstable criminal. This behavior created a stark contrast between the nature of his violent crimes and the persona he presented in the courtroom. Kaczynski, with his calm and rational demeanor, appeared like a man in full control of his actions. Yet the same man had orchestrated a campaign of terror carefully, designing bombs to kill and maim, leaving destruction in his wake. For the public and the jury, this contrast was jarring. The calm, seemingly rational man sitting in front of them seemed completely disconnected from the violent, destructive force he had been during the years of bombings. His calmness only deepened the unsettling nature of his crimes. How could someone so composed have caused such widespread fear and suffering? Psychologically, this juxtaposition likely had a profound impact on the public and the jury. They were forced to grapple with the unsettling notion that a man who appeared so controlled and rational was, in fact, a cold and calculated terrorist. The image of a calm, intellectual man who was capable of such horrific violence would have been difficult for many to process. His behavior added a layer of complexity to the trial, forcing those involved to confront the chilling reality of how ideology and madness could intertwine, making a seemingly sane person capable of unspeakable acts. One of the most defining moments of Ted Kaczynski's trial came when he rejected his attorney's suggestion to plead insanity, a move that could have spared him the death penalty. Despite the gravity of the charges against him, Kaczynski insisted that he was not suffering from any mental illness. Instead, he argued that his violent actions were the result of a carefully thought-out, ideologically driven mission, one that was rooted in his deep anti-technology beliefs. In his view, his bombings were not the acts of a disturbed mind, but the justified actions of a man waging a war against a society he believed was irreparably harmed by technology. This decision to reject the insanity's defense created immediate tension between Kaczynski and his legal team. His attorneys, who were committed to doing everything they could to ensure his survival, wanted to argue that Kaczynski was mentally ill in order to mitigate the severity of his crimes. They knew that a plea of insanity could be a powerful tool in saving him from execution or life imprisonment. However, Kaczynski was adamant. His insistence on maintaining full control over his defense and his ideology, rather than admitting to any psychological condition, meant that his defense strategy would focus on his belief in the righteousness of his cause. Kaczynski's refusal to acknowledge mental illness didn't just complicate his defense, it also reinforced his ideological motives. By rejecting any claim of mental instability, he sought to present himself as a rational actor, someone who had carefully planned his actions based on a belief system he thought was valid. His choice to frame himself as a man with a mission rather than a man with a disorder made it clear that his violence was not the result of delusion or irrationality, but of deep conviction. This decision allowed him to maintain control over the narrative of his life and actions, casting the bombings as a necessary, albeit extreme, act of resistance against what he saw as the unchecked advance of technology. In the end, Kaczynski's rejection of the insanity plea highlighted the profound tension at the heart of his trial, between his claims of ideological purity and the efforts of his legal team to save him from the consequences of his crimes. It also reinforced a central question that persisted throughout the trial. Was he a man driven by madness, or was he a terrorist whose acts were born from a carefully constructed, albeit twisted, philosophy? Ted Kaczynski's anti-technology ideology played a central role in shaping his strategy throughout the trial. From the very beginning, it was clear that he wanted to control the narrative of his case and ensure that his beliefs were seen as the driving force behind his actions. By rejecting the insanity defense, Kaczynski not only distanced himself from any claims of mental illness, but also sought to preserve his ideological stance. He wanted the court and the public to view him not as a deranged individual, but as a rational man fighting for a cause he believed in. His message was clear. His violent actions were not random or born of mental instability, but rather a calculated response to a society he believed was on the brink of destruction due to its unchecked technological advancement. Kaczynski's decision to reject the insanity plea was in many ways an effort to safeguard his ideology. He feared that by conceding to the idea of mental illness, his true message would be overshadowed. reducing his actions to those of a madman. Instead, he wanted to be seen as someone who had made deliberate, albeit extreme, choices based on his philosophical objections to modern society. He believed that if the court focused on his mental state, they would misunderstand the real purpose behind his bombings, namely to protest the overwhelming influence of technology on human life. The ideological battle became one of the key tensions of the trial. Kaczynski's defense strategy wasn't just about avoiding the death penalty. It was about defending his worldview, which he felt was misrepresented and dismissed by mainstream society. He wanted to ensure that his voice was heard, that his critique of technology, environmental destruction, and modern life was taken seriously, even if his methods were extreme and violent. The court had to confront the fact that Kaczynski's beliefs and the violence he perpetrated in their name were not the product of a disordered mind, but rather the outcome of a deeply held and dangerous conviction. This shifted the focus of the trial from merely assessing his sanity to exploring the larger implications of his anti-technology philosophy and the extremism it fueled. One of the most remarkable and controversial aspects of Kaczynski's trial was his insistence on representing himself in court. From the outset, Kaczynski made it clear that he wanted full control over his legal defense, rejecting the assistance of his court-appointed attorneys. His decision to represent himself was not only an unusual move, but also one that set the stage for a protracted legal battle between him and the court. The battle over Kaczynski's right to self-representation created tensions and delays, as the court had to carefully consider the psychological and legal implications of allowing a defendant, particularly one with such a high-profile case, to act as his own lawyer. At the heart of Kaczynski's desire to represent himself was his need for autonomy. This decision was deeply tied to his belief in personal freedom and control, reflecting the same need for independence that permeated his anti-technology philosophy. For Kaczynski, the court represented an institution that symbolized the very society he had spent years railing against, a society he viewed as oppressive, over-reliant on technology, and incapable of understanding his cause. By choosing to represent himself, Kaczynski sought to maintain full control over how his ideology was presented and perceived, using the courtroom as a platform to articulate his beliefs. He wanted to ensure that his message would not be filtered through the lens of traditional legal defense strategies or diluted by attorneys who might not fully understand or respect his views. Kaczynski stood in the courtroom as someone in control, someone who had a purpose, a message, and a platform to broadcast it regardless of the consequences. As Ted Kaczynski's trial unfolded, there was a significant shift in the public perception of the infamous Unabomber. Initially, Kaczynski had been a shadowy figure, an enigma whose actions spread fear and confusion across the country. The trial, however, provided the public with their first real opportunity to see him face to face. As the days passed, the image of Kaczynski began to transform. No longer just a faceless bomber, he became a man with a clear, if chilling, ideological framework, willing to defend his beliefs in the courtroom. Throughout the proceedings, Kaczynski's refusal to plead insanity played a pivotal role in reshaping his public persona. The media focused heavily on his rejection of the insanity defense, framing it as a deliberate, calculated move to position himself as a rational individual who was fully in control of his actions. This refusal to plead insanity not only made him appear more dangerous, but also made him seem more rational, as though he were a man with a clear purpose behind his violence. The media portrayed him not as a mentally unstable recluse, but as a calculated terrorist, determined to defend his anti-technology philosophy at any cost. This portrayal only deepened the public's fascination with Kaczynski. As the trial continued, the media became a lens through which the nation could watch Kaczynski's ideas unfold in real time. The courtroom became a stage for him to present his reasoning and beliefs, even as his actions were seen as heinous and destructive. People were drawn to his calculated demeanor and his ability to articulate his motives so clearly, as if he were not a man consumed by madness, but a person driven by a deep intellectual conviction. In a strange way, Kaczynski's refusal to acknowledge any mental illness and his insistence on representing his ideology in the most rational terms made him a figure of both fear and curiosity. The trial gave the public an opportunity to hear Kaczynski's reasoning in his own words, something that had been missing from the chaotic years of bombings and investigations. As he sat in the courtroom, unflinching and unmoved by the emotional weight of the victim testimonies, the public was able to confront the man behind the bombs. It was a surreal moment for many, seeing the Unabomber face to face, not just as a symbol of terror, but as a person who had crafted an ideology justifying violence. His calm, almost detached behavior, combined with his unwavering commitment to his beliefs, created a complex figure for the public to reckon with. As the trial progressed, Kaczynski went from being a faceless monster to a figure who was ideologically driven as he was terrifying. The media coverage, which had been steeped in mystery and speculation before the trial, now turned Kaczynski into something more than a criminal. It made him a figure of intellectual intrigue as people tried to understand the motivations behind his campaign of violence. His refusal to plead insanity only enhanced this perception, forcing the public to grapple with the question: was he just a cold-blooded killer, or was he a man who truly believed in a cause worth fighting for, no matter the cost? The courtroom, with its intense moments and stark confrontations, offered a new dimension to the Unabomber story, one that went beyond the violence and looked into the mind of the man who perpetrated it. This shift in public perception marked a crucial point in the legacy of Ted Kaczynski, making his trial not just the conclusion of his violent campaign, but also the beginning of a deeper, more uncomfortable examination of the person behind the bombs. Final moments of Ted Kaczynski's trials were marked by an unexpected turn of events. After years of tense courtroom drama, Kaczynski made a strategic decision to plead guilty to all charges in exchange for a life sentence, thus avoiding the death penalty. This dramatic shift in his approach to the trial stunned many, as it represented a stark departure from his earlier insistence on defending his ideological beliefs at all costs. Kaczynski's decision to plead guilty was not a surrender or an acknowledgement of guilt in the conventional sense. Instead, it was a calculated move to maintain control over his fate, something he had sought throughout the entire legal process. By pleading guilty, he could avoid the death penalty while still asserting his viewpoint that his actions were driven by a rational ideological mission rather than by a mental illness. In his mind, pleading guilty allowed him to avoid the label of being a madman, reinforcing his argument that his violent campaign against technology was justified, not the product of a delusional man. The resolution of the trial brought closure to a lengthy and grueling legal battle, but it also left lingering questions about Kaczynski's mental state and his ideological convictions. While the guilty plea ensured that Kaczynski would never face the death penalty, it did little to resolve the broader debate about whether he was mentally ill, driven by a sincere ideology, or a combination of both. His insistence on rejecting the insanity defense had placed these questions at the forefront of the trial, and even with the guilty plea, the court's inability to definitively answer them remained a point of contention. Moreover, Kaczynski's actions continued to raise questions about the relationship between ideology and violence. While the trial ended, it did not resolve the broader societal and legal implications of Kaczynski's anti-technology crusade. His manifesto, his bombs, and the reason behind his attacks were deeply connected to his beliefs about society, technology, and the future of humanity, making it clear that for Kaczynski, his violent acts were the means by which he sought to address what he saw as an existential threat posed by modernity. The trial, in its final moments, may have closed the book on his criminal actions, but it left open a larger discussion about the intersection of belief, sanity, and violence. Let me know your thoughts on this case in the comments section below. What are your thoughts about Ted Kaczynski defending himself in court and his shocking guilty plea? Of course, give us a thumbs up if you like our video, hit that subscribe button down below, hit the bell notification button to be notified of future videos, and of course, if you want to support the channel, you can buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/TCNS. As always, your support helps the channel grow, upgrade our equipment, bring in new hosts, be able to pay them, and take this show on the road. As always, thank you so much for watching and listening. We will see you next time.